Jake here. Before we start this week's episode, you should know that this one is going to be a little different. On Friday through Monday of this week, I was on vacation at Gamers Ranch with my wife Bridget, friends of the show Jamie Stegmeyer, Paul Solomon, and a bunch of other friends. I drove home yesterday and that evening recorded this episode that you're about to hear. I was a bit wiped out, and I'm not going to lie, we didn't do a whole lot of preparing anyways, which may show in the conversation that follows. On top of this, I've been catching up on work and some much needed things around the house today, and that hasn't left me with a whole lot of turnaround time to get this show edited and published. Still, the show must go on. So in order to get this episode out to y'all, I decided that I'm going to do the most bare bones edit possible, and I just wanted you to know going in that you're getting more or less the rough cut of this week's episode. So stick around because I do discuss my first experiences with a bunch of newer titles like Heat, Earth, The Search for Lost Species, and a bunch of other stuff. There are some hidden gems in there too, and Brendan also talks about what he's been playing. Okay, great. Enjoy the show, and we'll be back to regular programming next week.
What you talking about?
Welcome to Decision Space. Wait, I'm used to reading it.
The only
I'll try and do it.
Okay.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show that takes place right here between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And in today's episode, we're doing mini reviews of recent games we played. Jake and I recently went on a pair, not together unfortunately, of vacations. We're excited to report that we played a lot of games. Well, Jake did. I've played a lot of games, a few games recently that I'll sneak in, but Jake went on a gaming Nirvana vacation extravaganza.
A retreat.
A retreat. That's a word you could use. But who doesn't want to be invited to a gaming Nirvana extravaganza?
Okay, Brendan, where were you at?
I was on Cape Cod with...
Okay.
Yeah, where were you at?
That sounds lovely and delightful. I was at the Gamers Ranch in Missouri, which I could talk a little bit more about what that is in the main topic. But before we do that, please, if you would be so kind, leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. We're really trying to make a push for reviews so that we can continue to grow our humble little podcast. And thank you so much for taking the time to do that. We also wanted to let you know, if you're a pre-planner who likes to play games along with us, some games you can brush up on that we'll be doing deep dives on in a future episode. We have an episode planned where we'll be covering push your luck games, specifically Spot and Can't Stop. We'll highlight those two games and then talk about some other fun push your luck games and mechanism talk. And then we're also planning an episode on Ark Nova. So I think those will be our next two deep dive-ish episodes.
And then we have an exciting news to report. If you are a fan of Splotter Games or Food Chain Magnate, you need to thank our patrons, because our patrons recently got to vote for the next game that we would cover in a deep dive on Decision Space. And after much deliberation, many games voted for and recommended, like Concordia and Bunny Kingdom and lots of other stuff. They decided that the order was up and we'd be covering Food Chain Magnate. So Jake, get your weightlifting gloves out. It's going to be a heavy one.
I don't know if our patrons actually like us very much. No, I'm just kidding. I think sometimes they push us to play games we might not otherwise play, and I'm excited for the challenge. Less excited about figuring out how to get enough plays in to truly deep dive this beast, but nevertheless, it should be a great episode when we get to it.
I was really excited for the train game takeover. I thought we were rolling with full steam. We're going to get $18.99 in there.
We're the train game podcast.
We're the train game podcast. We're going to cover Ticket to Ride.
Ticket to Ride Europe.
Okay, we got to go to these mini reviews before we lose our listeners.
All right.
But Jake, okay, wait. Before we do that, what is Gamers Ranch?
Gamers Ranch is a vacation property here in Missouri. It's only about an hour and 50 minutes away from St. Louis, which is great for me because I live in St. Louis. So I was able to drive over there quite easily. Essentially, what it is like a really fancy Airbnb that sleeps 25 people or something like that. There's a big room full of bunk beds, but then there's also a ton of rooms that share like 2 queen beds. And then there's also several private rooms as well where you can have a little more privacy. In the property, there's a board game library that's well over 1,000 games that has all kinds of new stuff. Basically, one of the shelves you walk in is just like new games. They had, challengers. They had woodcraft. I don't know. They had basically all kinds of hot new games there. And then the other shelf in that main room is the Board Game Geek Top 100. So it has all the games in the top 100 just right there on that shelf. So that's a pretty cool setup. And then you go in and you basically have like a library that rivals, what they have at Geekway or your mid-sized board game convention for you to pick through and play. That's just on the board game side. There's also an arcade room where they have like Dance Dance Revolution, which I played, which was really fun. They've got like 5 free-to-play pinball machines if you're a pinball head. They've got like the brand new Stern machines. I went crazy on Godzilla, and I even got to type my initials in for like a couple of the challenges in there. So that was big for me. And then to top it all off, the vacation property is on a really nice sized lake. There's a ton of kayaks, so we went swimming in there. And then all around the lake is a legit 18-hole disc golf course that's like very nice, well maintained, and it's just an absolute joy to be able to walk out of your vacation property in the morning and get your disc golf round in before it gets too hot, cool off in the lake. And then that's your morning, and then you spend your afternoon and evening just gaming. I mean, it couldn't be more perfect for myself and kind of the group of friends that gathered there, many of which were from our board gaming / disc golfing St. Louis group. So yeah, we're really like hitting the bullseye on the Venn diagram of what this place offered.
Amazing. And to translate that for you, listener, this means you're going to get previews and mini reviews of an auction game, a deduction game, The Hotness, a review of one of Jake's favorite games of all time, but he played it in a new version. I'll talk about a train game. We'll talk about a Kramer and Kiesling game, trick-taking games, even hotter hotness. It's going to be really good.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say, if you're about the Games Ranch, I just want to say thank you to Jamie Stegmeyer, who organized the trip. Really appreciate the invite. This is the second year we've done it, and it's becoming like a highlight truly of my year. It's so much fun. So, really grateful that Bridget and I were included in that group. And I think it takes a tremendous amount of work just on the back end, like organizing schedules. Everybody's like bringing in food. So all the meals were sort of planned out. People like signed up for shift. So taking care of all that kind of legwork made everything just like go off without a hitch. And I think safe to say everybody there had an awesome time.
That's awesome. And, thank you to Jamie for yet another year of Jake being able to come back and report to us about all the amazing games he's played. My father recently sent me a book called 21st Century Monetary Policy, which is great because we're going to go right into quantitative easing.
Yes.
What do you think? So this is a classic auction game.
Is it a classic auction game? I think it's kind of new, right? And we're talking about, you said quantitative easing. I think the
QE.
actual name of the game is QE, which of course stands for that thing that you said.
Quantitative easing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is almost a modern auction game. As close as we get to a modern auction game, right? Where like auction games have fallen off. Like if anyone talks about an auction game that's well known in the last 5 to 7 years, I feel QE is in the mix. So what did you think of this maybe classic, maybe not classic, but very well known auction game?
I just had to look up, since you're throwing around this word classic. This came out in 2019. So just like in terms...
Within the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's pretty new, I think. But anyway, QE, I had a complete blast playing this game. It is just absolutely wacky. The crazy hook for QE is that it's an auction game that gives everybody whiteboards. And when you bid, you can bid any amount of money that you want because you are playing as a country who can print their own money. So one person might bid 1 cent and somebody else sitting right next to them at the same time might bid $1 billion. And all of that works within this game. And the fact that it works at all is absolutely insane. The actual mechanism of the game is essentially a flip and right, because what you're doing is just flipping over the commodity that people are bidding for. And then the auctioneer sets the price. If nobody bids higher than that, they buy it for that. And then everybody puts in their bid secretly. And then the auctioneer will give the, whatever the commodity is that people are bidding for to the player who bid the most, but keep their bid secret. And then the player who won it has to write down how much they spent on it on the back of the card, since they're all like dry erase material. And at the end of the game, you basically get points by collecting sets of different commodities. And in a high society like fashion, the twist at the end is whoever spent the most money cannot win. So it just is hilarious, wacky fun. We started out in the thousands, and by the end of it, we were bidding, somewhere, I think like the high water mark on what people were spending was like the person who lost had spent like 1.5 billion, but we were all kind of around like 1.3 billion ish. And it's just so funny. We also played with the expansion, which is hilarious and great. The expansion, what I believe it adds, this was my only experience with the game, so I'm not familiar with just the base game alone, but it adds a commodity you can get for second place, and there are three. One is oil, one is gold, and the other is crypto. I'll just explain crypto for the sake of time, but crypto is hilarious because it just gives you a random amount of points, 0 to 10. So you might buy it for like $300 million and get a 0 or a 10. And the whole thing is just hilarious. My only criticism about the game is it feels like the kind of game that's impossible to get better at. I played it, had fun. I was kind of like competitively in the mix, and I don't feel that same urge that I tend to have in a normal game where it's like, oh, I want to go back because I think I could do better. Like, this is just so wacky and off the wall that and everything's just like made up, right? We're all making up an economy on the fly that it doesn't really feel like there could be much improving, but maybe that's just my lack of capacity for understanding quantitative easing as a concept. So totally fun game, really simple rules that highly recommend everybody try this one at least once.
Okay, 2 questions. How long was your play?
Probably in the 45-minute range, if
great.
not
And
under. Yeah.
If you played again, would you just try to win every early auction? What's the meta?
That's pretty much what I tried to do. So the meta was like defined in our game by everything was like kind of in the tens of thousands of range. And I won a few auctions early. I thought I was doing really good. And then an auctioneer, I think, made what ended up being like a pretty big blunder, but he just set the price of an auction at $1 billion so we could all see that.
But then they lost.
So then I won it for like, so then I was like, okay, so I had spent like, 87,000 up to that point, which is like 0, right? When somebody else
compared to
$1 billion. So then I won the next bid for like, 37 million. I'm like, this is still pretty much 0 compared to $1 billion, right? But then, you kind of get money back. Whoever spent the second most, that's money you get back. So the game kind of turned on a moment where I think somebody put up a bid for like 600 million, and everybody was kind of like, let's sink them. But I really wanted the commodity. So I gave them 500 million. So everybody thought that they had lost a lot of money, but really they had only lost 100 million of net loss. And that person ended up winning. So I don't know. Maybe this gives you some concept of just like how wacky this game is, but totally fun experience.
That's one I would love to play. It sounds about as zany as I would hope. And yeah.
We should put on the list for Geekway next year.
Yeah, I think that'd be a perfect
game perfect
as a palate cleanse.
It'd be awesome to play with Decision Space listeners too. All right, well, that was quick. See, this is going to be really breezy. The next game I want to talk about, I think it's one that a lot of people listening will be excited about. It's the follow-up to The Search for Planet X, and this game is called The Search for Lost Species. If you've played The Search for Planet X, you know almost exactly how this game plays. It is a app-driven deduction game where each person has their own sheet of paper and they're trying to do a deduction puzzle to figure out where the lost species in the game must be following a set of universal logic rules that we're all given. So in Search for Planet X, you're searching for a planet, obviously, and the objects that you know about are like asteroids and gas clouds. In this game, it's all animals on an island. So it'll be something like there's a bird called a lorry, and you know that the lorry have to come in a diamond pattern. So if you find one lorry, you have a really good sense where the other ones are. There's like a python, and there's only one python, and I think that gives you some information about, like maybe like the hidden species can't be on the same terrain type as the python, stuff like that. The actions in this game, you're using the app to give yourself more information, so you can survey by foot, which takes a certain amount of time. That you kind of have a time tracked around the board that you're moving around, and it has this sort of last to act, first to go next. So whoever is last in time track gets to keep taking turns until they pass somebody. So you want to be really efficient with how you're using time. So you can survey by foot and look at up to three regions and say, is there a python in here? And the app will be like, nope, no pythons here. So you can like X off the pythons. And then you could survey by boat, which allows you to move faster and cover more ground for less time. But, it's not going to give you as specific of information because you have to look at like 4 things minimum, maybe. So I could be like, okay, I'm going to survey 1 to 7 and look for pythons. And the app will be like, nope, no pythons there either. And now I X off the python. So I'm like, great, I've knocked out like half of this. Where the F is this python? And that's pretty much how the game goes. There's other actions in it until somebody is ready to say, I think I found it on their turn. They can punch it in. The app will be like, yep, you're right. And that'll trigger the end of the game. The big difference between this one and the other one is that you actually have like a person on a map. So there's like
a spatial puzzle
a little bit going on. There's also power, like unique power cards you can get when you take the research action, which gives you like a very unhelpful, I found, logic clue, which I think maybe it was like underpowered in Search for Planet X, because in this one, when you take that action, you also get a powerful card. So that might give you bonus points at the end of the game for every lorry that you've successfully identified. Or mine gave me the ability to use only 2 time when I took the, search by foot action or whatever. So that was kind of a cool twist. I'm really terrible at these games. So my experience playing this, Search for Planet X, I'm always playing with my wife, and she's always like, great, I solved it. And I'm like, awesome. I think I know what is in these 2 of like 18 sectors. So it's fun playing this with some other people. Unfortunately, Bridget was also playing with us, and the exact same thing happened, but it was validating for me, right?
Right. She
It's
beat
like
everyone, not
going
just
on,
you.
and Bridget's like, I would like to solve. And everybody's just like, what? But and then it's like, yep, I got it right. Like, okay, great. So that was pretty much my experience with it. I think it was, fun game. If you're a fan of these, it just gives you a different type of deduction puzzle to solve. If you didn't like Search for Planet X, it's an obvious pass. But if you love deduction games, then I think this is an easy recommend. It's going to give you more of what you like in Search for Planet X. And it's also going to have some fun new twists. Though the last thing I'll say about it is the theme definitely falls apart a little bit compared to space, when you're like researching an island and it's like, this, hex on the island is a truly empty space, like no animals here, right? Or like a python cannot be next to a monkey, right? It's like, I don't think that's how forests work.
Nature's work, yeah.
It probably doesn't. It's not how space works either, but it's a lot easier for my brain to be like, of course, a glass cloud can't be next to an asteroid.
Sure, totally. That's so interesting. So I'm at like a little bit of a loss listening to the description, because I feel like if I was a huge fan of Search for Planet X, I'd probably be excited. I've never played it, and I feel like I'm in the same seat as you, where I'm like, okay, if I played a Search for Planet X, I'd probably like it okay, but maybe I'm not super hungry. I guess my question is, Jake, would you rather play more games like this, or play the Search for Lost Species again, or maybe play an exit game?
I mean, they're very different.
Sure.
From an exit
yeah, for
game.
sure.
Yeah.
For me, they're both like puzzle solving games.
They're both puzzle solving games. I think the big difference here is that this is a competitive game purely, right?
Sure.
So if you want to do a competitive deduction game, I think
It's a
this
good
is
one.
really good. I think Cryptid is one I've played too. That also seems really good.
Yeah.
All of these things just confound me so completely that it's hard for me to separate them that much. But the app worked great. The gameplay, was cool. It's definitely thematically engaging. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. To me, the difference was from where I'm coming from, not being like a expert at this type of game or that knowledgeable about them. The difference felt very small between this and Search for Planet X, which I own, and it made me want to go back and play that. Like, oh,
That
this
says
is
a lot.
fun. I should go play Search for Planet X again, but not like I'm gonna go get this new one because it's kind of the same.
Right. Interesting. Well, that sounds cool. I'm glad to know that Bridget's still mopping the floor with all y'all in these Search for games.
Yeah, she literally got it's Paul Solomon's game, friend of the show, president of the PWH fan club, and he got like 5 points, and Bridget got like 35. So she like 7x'd his score.
Slay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, Jake, this next game I'm very excited to hear about.
Yeah. Okay.
We're a little bit fans of it on the show.
Yes.
But
you've know.
This like mashup, special rules.
Okay, yeah. So the game we're talking about next is Challengers. Obviously.
Wait, there's big news.
Yeah, there's
big news. It won the Kennerspiel of yours.
Yes, it won the Kennerspiel. Okay, so anyway, I'll tell the story of this game. So we played Challengers at Gamers Ranch, but instead of just playing a regular game of Challengers, we got 16 people, had 2 sets of Challengers going. So we had 2 pods of 8, and then we had the grand champion from each pod play. Against each other for sick. One ultimate champion of Challengers for it was so much fun. Everybody had an awesome time, and it was like wrangling freaking sheep or whatever. Is that what people say? Wrangling sheep?
I think herding cats is
herding cats. Yeah. It was like herding cats.
I think wrangling sheep is easy.
Yeah, that's when I said I thought that seemed wrong, right? Anyone can do that.
Anyone can wrangle sheep.
Yeah, I'm easy for me to
All
say.
you need is a dog and a crook, and you're good to go.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, it was tough to get people to play because it was like this, I don't know. I think everyone should try this game. Obviously, I don't need to say that. We had a whole podcast saying that, but for whatever reason, a lot of people maybe didn't like their first play of it. It's just a polarizing game. So at first we had like 11 people, and we really, and I had to again thank Jamie because he was like fully on board. He was like, no, we need 16 people, right? So we kind of like went around tapping people, and then we had 12, and we're like, okay, 6 and 6, that'll work. And then one other person showed up, and then it's like, okay, now we're
so close.
Definitely need it. And then so we ended up getting all the way up to 16. So not everyone was super excited, but afterwards, like everybody had a complete blast with it. I heard comments like, literally I just like overheard somebody saying like, I'm still coming to terms with how much fun I had playing Challengers. So anyway, it was a total blast. We had mostly new players, so easy to teach. It went off without a hitch. Unfortunately, Paul did become our grand champion.
What was he playing?
He played a big exhaust strategy deck.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
Butlers, vacuums.
And my deck was so good. When I got like triple stable boy, I was like going off, but then which is kind of perfect. So by far the most. I probably played 25 times more than anyone else in the thing.
We have an illness, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'm just gonna like. I kept getting all these great cards. Like my deck was so good. I think I had like 4 dogs and 3 stable boys.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was crazy.
You really could herd sheep.
Yeah, but my stable boys, which can happen in the game, like my stable boys just kept coming up early. So I won like 1 through 4, but I couldn't find a win in 5, 6, or 7. I even lost to Bridget in round 7, who just nearly missed out on being in our championship game for our pod by like a couple of points in her first play, which is kind of great, right? It's like not like the most experienced person is going to win, but I still had just like so much fun playing my deck. And then like shortly after that, maybe it was like the next day or whatever, I saw that here's the big news, which was that Challengers won the Kennerspiel, which is really validating for me. Like I took that as a personal accomplishment. And I took it upon myself to like go around and like tell everybody at Gamers Ranch, probably pretty obnoxiously. But I honestly, a lot, again, polarizing views on that. I think it's great. I love the game. It maybe is, maybe the Kennerspiel could have some heavier stuff, or maybe something else should exist that is a step above that. But I mean, Kennerspiel, whatever. Challengers, awesome game, and I'm glad that it's getting recognition.
I love too hearing a story of like one, you have, you experience with the game, loving this experience of playing it at 16. Two, this anecdote of I'm still coming to terms with how much I enjoyed Challengers, which I think is a testament to like the raw fun factor of Challengers, combined with the fact that at its face value, it doesn't seem like a game you should play 20 times and then it will get better every time you play it. But ultimately, what we discovered on the show is that it is a game that gets better the more you play it, right? And I think that that's such a cool like testament to that. And I'm glad it won this Kennerspiel because it's almost licensed for people to go deeper. And it's a game that deserves it, even if maybe at face value it reads as like, this is zany party fun. And it is, but it also has these like really rich drafting decisions that are cool. So I love that it can exist in all these different forms.
One other player who was really skeptical going into the game, I overheard them afterwards saying, like, can we just keep playing? Like, let's just see how our decks fight against each other.
Oh, that's cool.
It was cool. Yeah. Again, like, I don't know why I take this as such a personal victory, but I really do.
That's awesome. Okay, so the next game, I was not at Gamers Ranch. So I'm talking about some games that I have played recently or maybe played in the past and have returned to. So one of the games that I wanted to talk about that I had a recent play of was Equinox, a 2021 re-release of Colossal Arena, which is itself a 1997 Reiner Knizia game. Equinox is beautiful. It's published by Plan B Games, the people who did Azul, and then that was the first game they did, so then they kind of just kept doing Azul. And then they also did Reef and some other things. But Equinox is a game that they decided to bring back. And it re-implements Colossal Arena. It's mostly the same game with a few other elements. But the pitch of Equinox / Colossal Arena is essentially that players are dealt a hand of cards and you're making bids on what suits will persist throughout a number of rounds as you play through the course of like 9 rounds, maybe slightly fewer. Maybe it's like more than 7 rounds of this game. And the way it works is you go around laying cards down to a tableau, and each round the suit that has the lowest value is removed from the tournament, more or less. So in Equinox, it's natural creature themed. In Colossal Arena, it's sort of fighting themed with mythical creatures. And each of these different suits, which are in Equinox, are represented by maybe a mystical stag or an ogre or a monkey or a phoenix, have a special power associated with them, such that if you are the one, you have 5 bidding chips. The earlier you bid on a suit, the more points you'll get for it if it persists until the end of the game. If it doesn't persist, you get no points. So there's some risk reward involved with public bids and people know what you're invested in. But if you have the most bids on a certain suit and you play that suit, you'll get to activate a special power associated with it. I think Equinox is an interesting Knizia game that I'm glad I've played. But now that I've played it a handful of times, around 5 or so, maybe 6 or 7, I've come to appreciate that it's a game with a lot of variance, which is not typically something that I am shy about. I like high variance games. We're just talking about how awesome Challengers is, but I don't think it gives you enough impactful decisions tied with that variance. So sometimes Equinox is a game where you can feel a little bit like you're along for the ride. It's fun to see what happens at times, but it's just long enough that it's a little bit of a bummer that your decisions don't have more impact. So for me, it's a Knizia miss rather than a Knizia home run, like so often his games are.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, which you already answered, which was going to be how long is it? Because I think having high variance and low decision impact is something that can still work, even though it sounds bad, if the game is really short,
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that in our upcoming Push Your Luck episode, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't belabor the point here too much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is, there's this tension whenever you bring a game back, Jake, right? Like Colossal Arena came out in 1997. It had this following somewhat and was known as a good gem of his catalog. And there's this tension whenever you bring a game back. This was 24 years later. Do you preserve what was there, or do you modernize it for the modern audience and the contemporary taste? And I feel like Equinox maybe a little bit took the middle ground approach, where it tries to make some changes that try to accommodate a new taste, but it doesn't go far enough. And I almost wish, you're going to make a new game, you're going to retheme it, you're going to name it something else. I kind of wish they had just taken the system and said, how can we really make this sing with Kinesia maybe? So yeah, cool game.
Makes
I'm glad to
sense.
have played it. Glad
I'm
to move
gonna
on.
take that transition and run to something old and new that I played at Gamers Ranch, which was the opportunity to play Castles of Burgundy Deluxe. So Castles of Burgundy is famously, probably one of the most famous things about it is that it's one of my personal favorite games.
Well known across the world.
Yeah. So I actually, with the Gamers Ranch, there was a sheet going around like, what are some games that you'd want to play? And I put in there, like, if anybody has the Castle of Burgundy Deluxe Edition, bring it. I'd love to take it for a spin. I didn't back it myself, and I've been having a little bit of FOMO seeing that, on Facebook or whatever, people are getting these Castle of Burgundy games, and it is absolutely stunning, as gorgeous as advertised. The personal player boards are like, triple layer deep or whatever, where you can have like a grid, I don't know, nexus thing that you put in there so that all your tiles like fit perfectly and can't be moved around. Everything has its perfect spot where to go. Each tile has its own bag, which really truly does a lot to speed up the setup and teardown. So I have only good things to say about that, and I absolutely loved my experience playing it. But I do want to offer, I guess, some commentary or criticism around some of the expansion stuff that I had the opportunity to play with, which is that let's go on a little journey, Brendan.
Okay.
I have the old Ravensburger Aaliyah version of Castles of Burgundy that's in like the Burgundy
Beautiful
box.
beige.
Yeah, it's just like the one that was like forever. Like when I first joined the hobby in 2015, everybody's like, that was like the one game that everybody was like, this game needs a reprint. We can't play this. It's so ugly. Okay. And then they came out with like the, I don't know, 20th anniversary edition, even though the game was like 11 years old or that at that point. So don't ask. That came out and it's fundamentally, it didn't look the best in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I was like, skip it. But that game did include a small gameplay mechanical change in that it added a new science tile that is, in my opinion, and seemingly most people's opinion, just completely overpowered compared to the power level of the rest of the science tiles. This is the one. I'm not going to explain how Castle Burgundy works. If you're interested, we have a whole episode on it. But this is the one that allows you to spend 2 workers to get a good from the black, or get a tile from the black market.
Whoa.
Right. Is that crazy?
That's
Powerful?
silly.
Yeah. So you can just spend your turn to get 2 workers and then just get that. Okay. So I was kind of interested, like, what are they going to do with that in going this new version? And the way I understand it is like the new version not only has that tile, but it has some other new tiles that are recommended for play. I think recommended. The person who owned the game said, I basically keep these in at all times. And they were like on the basic player aid. So that's my assumption. So they added some new tiles that are kind of interesting. There's a white tile that can go in any region, and it doesn't have any beneficial effect.
It just fills up a region.
And when that region is scored, it counts as 1 higher capacity. So if you fill up a 3 region with that, it counts as like a 4 region.
That's great.
One of those comes out every round in the black market. There's like 3 new buildings. Or no, there's 2 new buildings. There's a really cool one called the White Castle, which when you play that, you get to use the white die as an extra action, which is, I think that one is super cool, right? Because that's like, it's limited. It's not just like a free action like a castle, and you have to really pick your spot to where you're going to use that. That one's a home run. And then there's another one that when you play it, it's another building that when you play it, you can trigger any building ability, which seems kind of busted, right? Like just better than all the other ones. And then there's there's another animal. There's goose in the game. It's 2 geese, and they count as wild animals, which is pretty rad.
That's also adorable.
I love that one because I think the animals are like not the most powerful thing you can be doing. So amping those up a little bit to help people like complete their sets, or that's for the good. But my commentary here is like, it already felt like in the regular old version of the game, the boards that have larger areas of building tiles are a little bit better than the boards that don't have that. Everybody's always going to be playing the same amount of tiles roughly over the course of the game. You're going to end with like approximately 5 or 6 empty spots. So if that's true, you want to be filling up bigger regions because they just get more points.
Right.
By and large. And there used to be a big risk reward factor, right? If I have a board that has a 7 or an 8 area of building tiles, because you can't have 2 of the same type of building in a town, region or whatever, it was like people could really try and like block you, but that's basically entirely gone, right? Because you have the white tile that can go there and 2 new building types, making it like far easier to complete those spaces. So it just makes it feel like the different boards are like more unbalanced with this new setup. This was my first play with any of this stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to add that thought. The mitigating thing of all this is the game comes with like literally like 100 sheets of city boards. So there's like 25 different ones, and it comes with 4 of each one. So everybody could always play the exact same board. That's how I'm going to recommend to our audience to play it, because I think the boards are just like not balanced, and they've sort of mitigated it in that way. Be like, okay, if you want it balanced, just play the same board. And I think that's a pretty good solution. But those are my thoughts on this game. Really unmatched production. I'm jealous of everyone who has it, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be rushing out to buy it just yet.
Do you think if this game was free to you, would you be excited to play this version more and explore this version more?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of expansions in there that I've never played, and I definitely want to play more. It's just a matter of like, how often am I really going to get it to the table? Like, it feels like a perfect case where like, if anybody I know has this, like, I'm just going to be like, hey, I want to like explore this with you, because that would probably be the person in my life who I would play it with anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just try and free ride on this.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's really cool. And I love hearing about a lot of the changes that happened in that game. I didn't know about the white tile or
I
some
had
of those
no
little
idea
twists.
either.
Yeah,
so
which seemed really meaningful.
Yeah, it's like a meaningfully changed re-implementation, and includes like all of the expansions that have ever existed, including like a brand new one that we didn't play with. That seems like it does a lot of really interesting and wacky things. So there's a ton of content in that box to explore for the Castle of Burgundy fan, which I am one, but I'm just also a fan of like other stuff. So
yeah,
it's tough. Totally. It's a tough one. Maybe I should get it. I'm waffling.
It's tough too when you've invested, this is a game you have access to playing online, so you've played it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So at some point, no matter how much you love eating, I don't know, salmon nigiri, eventually it's like, maybe I should try the yellowtail.
Absolutely.
Well,
Brendan, why don't we jump over to one of your next ones, since I've been talking a lot.
That sounds great. So Jake, playing Chicago Express, I had my train game radar peaked, I guess. Radar's probably the wrong metaphor. My train game throttle peaked?
No, that's worse.
No. The trains have a throttle, I think. More to come, we're the Train Game Podcast.
Game Podcast.
Anyway, one of the other games designed by the designer of Chicago Express that's kind of well known and accessible to play on Board Game Arena is called Paris Connection. And this game was pitched to me by Ender of our Discord as sort of a party train game, which was a novel thing. I sort of said, okay, how would that work? And Paris Connection is interesting because you have the shares that are available in a typical train game. So you're trying to buy into certain rail lines that are each getting their own points. And at the end of the game, you get paid out based on the number of shares that you have. The shares act as a multiplier against the points that those rail lines have earned. And they're trying to build these rail lines across all of France. So there's like a handful of train colors, let's say 5. And each turn you have a simple choice. Do you want to build out a rail line using available pieces from that railroad? So it's a cube rails game. There's no shapes. You're just adding the pieces to a given space, hoping to connect them to cities, which will get that rail line more points. Or do you want to swap out a piece in your rail line portfolio for new colors that are available. So a lot of the game revolves around this tension of, okay, do I want to manipulate the board state in a way that would be advantageous for the shares I already have? Or do I want to get new shares of a different company? But all of this is happening in a way that people will see what shares you're opting into, which might shift what they do. So much of train games, right, is trying to get to piggyback on other people's actions, or maybe find a way to incentivize them to take actions that will benefit you. So a lot of this is figuring out what rail lines other people are already invested in and figuring out the right time to snatch up all those shares so you can get paid out. It plays very quickly. It's a breezy game with a light rule set. I will say I didn't find it as engaging or deep as Chicago Express, but I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's one that I'd love to try on the table. And I think pretty novel to have a game that plays 5 players fairly comfortably and fairly quickly as well, for a game that's sort of not just a party game, like Just One or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like one I should try maybe online. I have heard the criticism that it can be one of those games that takes as long to set up as it takes to play.
Yep.
A kind of like a hey, that's my fish situation. But yeah, it sounds like a fun game, and I'm glad you've been having fun with it.
I think this is one that you might really dig if you played it and kind of got into the
Yeah.
headspace. And it's also one that you might go, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, train games are still just like a weird space range. Obviously, like we're huge train gamers
Right.
now.
Right.
This
Yeah,
is like
yeah.
the train game podcast. We don't even have to say that. People know. But like subsequent plays of Chicago Express, I feel like if anything are like reinforcing my kind of like weirdness about it. So I would be interested to try this different riff and see if like similar problems pop up for me, or if I dig it more.
And it's so interesting. These subsequent plays of Chicago Express, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this game.
You
I
like it
I
more?
can't get enough.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
funny. That's awesome. Yeah, and
We
so listen to our Chicago Express episode for more thoughts of and kind of where we ended up diverging a bit on that. Brenda, I wanted to just tell a really quick story from the ranch
Okay.
as a interlude, because one of the cool things about the ranch, okay, is there's a disc golf course right outside. But
Amazing.
there's also a lake right outside. And when you're standing on the back porch area, there's a peninsula with a disc golf basket on it, and it's about 320 feet to land, which is
That's
not
a
like
long shot.
it's a good distance shot. It's not like an
Football field.
impossible distance to reach, but you know that's close to my max power.
Yeah.
But it's also a peninsula, right? So it's not like you can just throw it that far, because if you're not throwing it that far and accurately, it's going to be water on all the other sides.
Yep.
And there's like a railing, like a handrail, so people don't fall in the lake. So you can't just I don't know if the railing really messes up your shot, but it definitely is like in your head. You're like, I don't want to
Sure.
just like slam my hand on this railing or like chuck a disc right into this railing.
Oh,
So
wow.
anyway, we spent a lot of time throwing discs at that peninsula, losing them in the water. We found some floating discs that they just had at the Gamers Ranch for people to like practice or learn the game. So, and these were like really, they're called like flippy, like understable. That's the disc golf term, like that they want to like turn over in the air and go right when you throw it backhand. So I was
Weird.
like throwing this thing hard. It's basically like corkscrewing and going into the water. And we had Bridget out in a kayak, and Scott, another person that was there, were in kayaks, like driving around, like collecting these discs and bringing it back to us. So we spent a lot of time doing that. And then I was playing games with friend of the show, Paul Solomon, and we got done with the game. And Paul's like, I'm like, Paul, like, what are we going to play next? And Paul's like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there. Paul was in rare form this whole day. Okay. And he's like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to chuck one of these things onto the peninsula. So he takes the disc. He's in Crocs and he's going to toss this thing. And I have it all on video. It's an incredible video. And I just tell you this to say that Decision Space has recently created an Instagram. And I'm just going to encourage everyone to, if you're on Instagram, follow us on Instagram, and you'll see the exciting conclusion of this Croc disc golf shot.
Okay, and for reference, Paul Solomon is like one of the best disc golfers in St. Louis.
Not one of the best in St. Louis, but he's definitely one of the best in our group. He's like
Okay.
the second best of like the 20 of us that are like we'll play together.
Okay, I saw on Instagram recently. Paul was like, "I just went to this course and beat the record by like
He
minus
shot
4 or 5
17
or something."
down of
Yeah, that's
18
insanity.
possible, but there's so many good disc golfers here.
That's awesome.
Okay,
Well,
he's like in the upper echelon for sure. I'm just jumping in here from the edit to say that I've thought about this more and I've changed my mind. I do think Paul is one of the best disc golfers in St. Louis. Congratulations, buddy.
that's a very exciting anecdote, and I'm really excited that Decision Space has an Instagram. I've really been enjoying watching.
Was that
Jake's.
like pretty like flawless of
It
like
was
a
really
promo? Yeah,
it was
do you
really
think I got
slick.
away with that?
Yeah, and I'm really excited now. I want to go see the video, which will hopefully be posted soon.
And Bridget also wanted me to tell the story about how she was in the kayak.
I think that's really
disc.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cool anecdote. Follow us on Instagram. I'll be posting images of the games I play. I know Jake will continue to be doing that as well. And we'd love to interact with you there. If you don't follow us on other places, that's a great place to stay engaged with Decision Space and maybe get a sneak peek of what we're playing and might cover on the show.
Totally. And it's brand new that we just added it. Anyway, we have some more games to talk about, so don't go anywhere. This next one, I just think some people might be interested to hear what I thought. I played Earth. It's a hot game. It's in the tableau laying game, very much like Terraforming Mars, which is kind of like a miss for us on this podcast compared to other people. I mean, we thought it was good. Okay. Brendan really hated it though. And in Ark Nova, right? You're building out a 4x4 grid of plants essentially, and those plants are like getting spores on them. It's got a classic like leader and follow mechanism. So I think there are 4 or maybe 5 actions in the game that everybody takes it. They get the powerful action, and then everybody else around the table gets the secondary action, which is cool because it makes it so that the game almost plays like real time. Like everybody's just always doing stuff, almost to the extent that you're like, wait,
whose turn is it?
Miss an action? Whose turn is it? Is this the second yellow in a row that we've done, or are we still on the first one? My big takeaway was, I'll be honest, like it didn't pop for me at all. I thought it was fine. I would play it again if asked, but I wouldn't seek out more plays of it just because I think some of the other games in that space, Terraforming Mars and Ark Nova, while they are much longer games and have more rule grit for sure to making them less accessible, like that really pays off in having unique and interesting cards that have a lot of character. My biggest problem with Earth was that every card felt the same. I had like mushroom and I had foliage and I had dirt or whatever, and they all basically are just like doing the exact same type of resource conversion. I'm sure those nuances come out more if you play it a bunch of times and you kind of realize the different ways things can work together. But that was my one play impression, and I just wanted to share it with the podcast listeners.
And I love hearing your impressions of the hotness, Jake. And this one, I'm not surprised that it was maybe that was neat.
Yeah. And that might just speak to our like taste for different mechanisms. Yeah.
And also glad to know that I've heard the feedback a fair amount that the simultaneous, everyone's turn, you get to take actions on other people's turns and the turns kind of break down. It's nice to know, at least as a forewarning, that same thing kind of popped up in your game Yeah. But yeah, the next game I'm really curious to hear about.
Okay. This next game was my play of the weekend.
Wow.
Okay. It was one I was really excited to play because I've been playing it on Yukata with you and some of our Discord listeners. And it's all part of our personal exploration of Kramer and Kiesling games. And the game is Torres, kind of the honorary fourth wheel of the Mask trilogy, using many of the similar action point mechanism, action selection, whatever menu mechanism. In Torres, you play as knights, and the king has just announced that his inheritance will go to the offspring, whatever, progeny, to the progeny,
descendants,
to the descendant who claims the tallest and best castles.
It's the weirdest fairy tale.
So it's another one of those like abstract area control games, but on this one, similar to Cusco, you're building castles vertically up over the course of the game. You have your actions are like placing knights on the board, moving knights around. You can also draw an action card. So there's like a deck of 10 action cards. Everybody has the same deck. When you take that action, you get to draw 3 action cards, put 1 in your hand. The other 2 can go on top or bottom, and they do a lot of really cool game-breaking effects. Like normally the whole game is about like blocking people with your knights and with castle blocks, because you can never, go into somebody else's space. You can never join 2 existing castles together by placing a block that would join them. So then the cards that you're getting are like leapfrog a knight, or like, jump. Normally you can only climb 1 elevation level in a step, and this other card lets you climb 2, or move an unoccupied existing block from one place to somewhere else. So all kinds of crazy stuff that can do it. The scoring is like dead simple. You just score each castle, where you multiply the level your knight is standing on times the number of base, like the width of it, right? So if there's like a base of 5 blocks area, that makes sense, and I'm on the 3rd level, then I get like 15 points. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But this game like is just so much fun. It's just absolutely, streamlined, elegant, interactive, puzzly, and this has this amazing innovation on T-Call, where instead of 10 action points, 5. Okay?
Way easier to count.
Yeah, which really, unsurprisingly, does a lot for making turns feel more like a reasonable board game turn by modern board game standards. And I was really excited to play it. And at least one of the other players who was also new to it said that it was her favorite play of the retreat or whatever, the weekend as well. So it won many fans, at least 2 fans. I don't know. What questions do you have about this one?
What about this play of Torres do you feel like made it pop for you, Jake? Was it the interactivity and the blocking that really came to the fore? Was it the card system? Was it just the density of decisions offered because of that action point system? But the fact that it was knocked down to 5 made it more manageable?
Yeah, I think so. I played T-Call again on the table recently. I also played Cusco on the table recently, and I really enjoy both of those games, but they do make people want to AP.
Yeah.
And this and it's not just because those games allow more action points, but in Torres, it's like the things you can do that help you are just a lot more obvious.
Yes.
And there's better ways to go about that. And most importantly, there are ways to go about that will set you up to be able to do helpful things better in the future. But on any given turn, it's pretty clear, like, I can do, okay, I'll be able to like get this knight up to this level, or I can like expand the base of this one I'm already standing on, because you only like, that's limited how many times you can actually build a castle block. The card play is super fun too. And then the last action you can do on your turn is just like move up on the victory point track. So the game also just gives you an easy out. It's like, guess what? If you can't see anything else to do, you can just get a point. And that, I think, is that's the worst action, right? Because the end game score is like 180 to 150 or whatever. So 1 point's probably not doing that much for you, but at least gives you an out that you can do something if you really get stuck or at the end of the game. So that can help keep it clipping along. Yeah, I'd only played it asynchronously before, but it felt like it gave me all the fun I had in T-Call, and it really kept it to like 50 minutes, an hour, instead of
2.5 hours.
2, plus.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear you had a great play of Torres. And I think this is not the last time y'all will hear about Torres on our show.
Sounds good to me. All right, and I'll keep going since I've played more. Another one I'll discuss briefly is a game called Arcana Rising, and I believe this was published by Gray Fox Games, which is a St. Louis-based board game publisher. It's very much drafting games in the realm of Sushi Go, Seven Wonders, or whatever, where you just have like a 6-card hand. You're taking something, adding it to your tableau, and passing. It has a really cool mechanism where there's like 5 different classes of magic. So it's basically you have 5 colors in the game, and there comes with like 10 poker chips that are 2 of each color, and you randomly will lay those out. So there'll be in each of the 6 rounds of the draft, except for the last round. So the first 5, you'll have 2 different classes of magic activated. And on your turn, you can either play a card to your tableau, or you can discard a card to activate all your spells in those 2 colors. So you basically activate those 2 portions of your tableau. And that decision is super fun, and it really works well for sort of keeping like a manageable mental bandwidth, but still enabling like some strategy and pre-planning for your draft. And the game also does a really good job of getting you into your like unique build right away. You know, you take one card and you're like, okay, I think I'm going for this type of thing, which works really well in this type of drafting game. So overall, I really liked it. I think it was widely enjoyed by everyone. The only like caveat I would give is that I'm not like a big like balanced person. I try and be like, okay, we had one play, so I don't want to say the game's not balanced, but there definitely like a degenerate combo was discovered by the winning person that they just kept like hitting over and over and over and end up winning the game by like 40 points. So it's like, everybody else had like 30 to 40 and they had like 78 or 80 points. So I don't know if that means like with future plays, more of those combos will come out, will be discovered by players, or like people can be smarter about not allowing these 2 specific cards to get picked by the same player. But yeah, it was a really fun, quick drafting game that I would recommend people check out if they're a fan of that genre.
Cool. And that was Arcana Rising.
Yeah, and the whole box is foil. So don't let that stop you from checking it out.
Shiny.
Yeah.
Okay, what about this next game?
Okay. I'll talk about this next game. Wait, do you want to talk about your game and then I'll finish with the last 2?
Sure, let's do that.
Let's do that.
So longtime listeners of the show will know that I really like a game called The Fox in the Forest, which is a 2-player trick-taking game in which players are trying to either win lots of tricks or no tricks at all, more or less. You're trying to figure out if your hand is one such that you want to be winning lots of tricks, or essentially making the other player win so many tricks that they bust, more or less, and lose. So I have great fondness for that 2-player trick-taking game. So I was excited to explore another 2-player trick-taking game that comes highly recommended called Jekyll versus Hyde. Jekyll versus Hyde has a lot of similarities to The Fox in the Forest in that it has 3 suits, just like The Fox in the Forest has. It's a 2-player trick-taking game, and it also has some interesting powers that shake up how the hands might play out, which can be an issue in these 2-player trick-taking games, where even if there's a few hidden cards, you'll probably have a pretty good sense for what is in your opponent's hand because you know what's in your own hand. So given a limited card pool, you can deduce fairly quickly what you don't have, meaning your opponent probably has that. So Jekyll versus Hyde takes this idea of maybe sometimes you want to win tricks and maybe sometimes you want to lose them in Fox in the Forest, and switches it on its head and makes it such that players take turns playing these asymmetric roles where Dr. Jekyll is a role in which you would like to win both players to win the most even number of tricks possible. You want to both win. I think there's 10 tricks. The perfect score for you is 5 and 5. Mr. Hyde, on the other hand, when you're playing that character, you either want to win all the tricks or lose all the tricks. There's an interesting thing where the value of these suits, the rank of them, shifts based on when they're played. So the first suit played is the lowest value. The next one that comes out is the middle value, and the final one is the highest value suit. And then what's layered over all the top of this is each of the suits have a power associated with them when these special suitless potion cards get played. So the red one lets you erase that rank order and reorder, so they'll be reordered midway through the match. So your sort of calculus around winning and losing suits could really change if you've been saving up a set of cards you think will be the winning suit, and now it's the lowest ranked suit because your opponent has deduced that and set you up. There's another one that means that when you win that color, or whoever wins that trick gets to win 2 cards instead of just 1, so it can create these nice little swings. And the other color, green, when green is played against a potion, you exchange cards with your opponent. So you can set up these situations where you're playing perfectly, except you have 2 cards that are going to ruin your strategy, and you just flick them over to the other side, and then you finish that way. I find Jekyll versus Hyde really, really lovely. I really enjoy playing this game. I think it's nice how it takes this sort of core ideas that the Fox in the Forest were building on and inverts them in some ways. It makes one player always want it to be even. One player either want to win all or lose all the suits. I think it's fun playing the game from each of those asymmetric positions. And it can be really tough when you're playing Mr. Hyde. Did I do that right? Yeah, Mr. Hyde,
I
Dr.
don't
Jekyll
know.
and
Yeah.
Mr. Hyde.
You tell me.
When you're playing Mr. Hyde, I think I'm doing that right. To be the one who to try to figure out, do I really want to be winning suits or do I really want to be losing suits? This game could be hugely swingy though. I find oftentimes either you end up with like a very close even game or just you get totally blown out. To accommodate for this, you play it over 3 rounds and it's kind of a race to the end of the track. So there's this built-in padding. I like it. I've played it around 20 times, 25 times.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
it's a really good game. I've played the Fox and the Forest more than that.
Sure.
And I don't think it jumps above the Fox and the
No.
Forest for Maya and I, but it's one I enjoy. I recommend. And there's a new co-op version coming out that I'm excited to take a look at as well. So I think that one's called, it's Jekyll versus Hyde versus Scotland Yard. So we just throw an extra versus in there.
Nice.
Yeah. Co-op version. So
Can't wait for the third one.
Yeah, Jekyll versus Hyde versus Scotland Yard versus Sherlock Holmes or something.
Gotham City.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that's Jekyll versus Hyde.
That's cool, man. Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways, inverting Fox and Forest sounds like taking out the most interesting part of the Fox
Sure.
and Forest, right? Where you get to like kind of choose that or play towards something and you're like have that mind game with your opponent. We're like, oh, wait, they're trying to lose tricks.
Yeah.
You know? So that's interesting. Having not played Jekyll versus Hyde.
I will say, taking that out, I agree with you, Jake, that on the face, it seems like, oh, that's so much of the tension of that core system that I loved. But what you get in return is the powers in the Fox and the Forest on the different suits are really cool, but you don't always feel creative when you use them. And here you have the potion cards that give you a lot of flexibility. And I would say make you feel even more clever than when you use the special power cards in the Fox and the Forest wall. So I'd recommend you even as a trick-taking sort of like, oh, they're okay. Check this one out with me sometime on Board Game Arena. I think you'd dig it.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get more into trick-taking games, and to help me do that, I have my good friend Pete Wissinger. I hope I'm saying Pete's last name right. I really don't know. But Pete is a listener of this podcast, and he's also like a major trick-taking game enthusiast. So he has like 35 trick-taking games in his collection, he said, something like that. And he brought like 17 of them to Gamers
Wow.
Ranch. And I didn't really have a lot of opportunity to overlap with Pete, unfortunately. But at the very end of the night, actually the last game I played, I had the chance to sit down with Pete and Dave and Henry to play one of the trick-taking games that they have been devouring over the course of the day. And I basically asked Pete, I said, like, give me your best one. What is the one that's going to really like cinch trick-taking games for me? And he pulled out Nokosu Dice. And Nokosu Dice is, I understand, a really small print run trick-taking game that was imported from Japan. I think it was actually created and published by a board game cafe over there. If I'm paraphrasing what they told me correctly. And Nokosu Dice is really interesting because it's a trick-taking game that also has dice. So the way this game works is you have 4 suits, I think, and you have 40 cards, right? You deal every 10 cards. Then everybody takes 2 dice out of the bag actually, I think there's 5 colors, in matching colors, right? That match the suits of the card, and you roll those 2 dice in front of you. So if you roll 1 purple and a 5 green, guess what? Those are cards that you can play as tricks. Brendan, the dice are cards.
And you have a hand of cards too.
And you have a hand of cards, but you have some dice that are visible that everybody
Wow.
can see that you can use to win tricks. Okay. But that's not all, right? This is where your brain's going to really start to expand galaxy brain style because you roll out a bunch of other dice before you start going. I don't know, maybe like, I feel like I ended with like 5 dice each. So maybe it's like 3 more dice per player gets rolled. And then we all draft them one at a time. So then we draft dice, okay, in front of us. So now I have like 5 or 6 dice in front of me that are cards. Right? The dice are cards.
Wow.
Okay. I can't stress that enough. But there's more, okay, because there's one extra die that won't get drafted because there's an uneven number of players or dice for players or whatever. So that one die that is not drafted is the trump suit and trump number. So does that make sense to you? So if the green 5 is not drafted, then green is the trump suit, and also all 5s are trump. Okay.
Wow.
And they're in their own suit too. They don't count as green anymore, which is confusing. But fine. Okay. So if you're the last person to draft, that's apparently called the hammer. You have the hammer because you have a lot of power to determine like how powerful, your hand and other people's hand are, and dice. Okay. But there's one more wrinkle. Okay. So now we're going full galaxy brain here, which is that we're going to play suits and you're going to try and win suits. Okay. Right. Or you're going to try and win tricks. Every trick that you win, that's 1 point, but you're also going to make a bid for how many tricks you're going to win, right? You've heard about that before.
Yep.
Yeah. But what if I told you you don't make that bet at the beginning, because the last die that you have in front of you that is not like if you have 2 dice left in front of you,
that's your bid.
You use one, and the other one, the number of that becomes your bid for how many tricks you're going to win. So You're trying to like manipulate all of that into like, I guess I'm trying to win like 3 different tricks. Okay. And it's totally crazy, totally mind like
my neurons aren't ready,
evaporating to like try and do it. But I told Pete afterwards, I think we played like 3 rounds and it was like pretty late and I went to bed, but it was very fun, like a really cool game. I liked a lot, and I ended up like successfully navigating one. I didn't win. I think I got like last of everybody points wise, but one of my bids was right in one of those 3 rounds, and it just felt like a miracle, like that like all of this had happened, and I ended up with the number of tricks that I won, perfect.
That sounds so novel and interesting. And it also sounds like, Jake, the draft would just be like loaded with tension.
I think that it might be. Of course, I was not really operating on that level of understanding, but even at a base level, like Pete gave me a really helpful tip where he's like, just try and take different numbers, right? Because then if you have a lot of different numbers, then you have options open as you get down to it. But it's really crazy because like you don't want to necessarily take dice. I found that you don't have cards in the matching suit, because in the first round we were playing, like I was like doing really good. Like I had won 4 tricks and I had like a 2 and a 4 left. And then somebody played a card like a red 2, and I had no choice but to use my red die that I was going to use as my trick bid because it was red and you have to follow. So you like pulled the thing I was going to use as my bid out from under me. So there's a lot to unpack there, but like super cool game. I don't know if it's possible to get. It might be, it might not be. It'd be easy, I assume, to like, it's just some numbered cards and some dice. But that was Nokosu Dice, and I'm excited to have played it and share with y'all, and also excited to learn more about trick-taking games from Pete, because if they're like this, then I think I like them.
And would you play this again?
Oh, 100%. I would. Yeah. I was like sad that I had to like leave. I was just like, okay, it's getting really late. But yeah, I would play this again. And yeah, it made me excited to see, what, there's like 17 of these other boxes next to it that are all like completely unfamiliar to me. It really made me want to know like, well, what's like the twist in these other ones?
The presentation too of Nokosu Dice is really charming.
It is.
It's the colors are all quite vivid. It reminds me of I read a lot of kids books these days, Jake, as you can imagine. It reminds me of like a beautiful, do you remember the rainbow fish or whatever?
Oh yeah,
book? It reminds me of that almost to a T, kind of like Eric Carle watercolor type stuff going on as well.
It has like really a little bit beautiful. Of like a paper craft like, look to it. Yeah, totally. So it was nice, and it was a fun game and like a surprise to me. I had never heard of it, and I was playing it. And it was just one of those moments where like, yeah, games are awesome.
Yeah.
This is just cool. Like a handful of cards and like some colorful dice, as some super small box. What a winner.
And dice are cards. What a novel idea.
Is that great? Well,
it's really crazy.
They were like, Pete was like, well, we could play this or Nokosu Dice. I was like, I like dice. And he's like, "You like dice?" And then that was the
Oh,
one we
that's
picked.
great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Jake, I feel like we've done the listeners a small disservice by not hitting them up front with the fact that coverage of this game was coming. I said it was going to heat up, and then it was going to heat again,
Oh,
up again. But here we are. The pedal is to the metal. Jake, you played the hottest of the hotness
the
recently.
hottest of the hot.
You played Heat.
Heat. Yeah, I played Heat twice.
Wow. Okay. How was it?
Well, the fact that I played it twice at this setting should tell you that it was well received by me and well received by others, because I was in 2 games of Heat, but I know that at least one other game of Heat was happening. Like, people were like playing this game and then excited to teach others and play it more. If you're not familiar, Heat is a racing game that is card driven, and it uses a mechanisms similar, but I guess, I don't know if improved upon is fair, but certainly iterated upon from
Flamme Rouge.
Flamme Rouge. Thank you, Brendan.
Yep.
I totally lost it there. So basically, the game works as follows. Everybody will simultaneously choose a gear to go in. So you start in first gear, and you can go up 1 or down 1, or you could spend a heat to go up or down 2. So whatever gear you're in, that's how many cards that you play. Your cards are numbered. So maybe if I play a 3, and a 1, that means I'm moving 7 spaces.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Then so after everybody's secretly simultaneously pick their cards, we take turns resolving them sort of in order of the race. So whoever's in first place goes first. And then when you're going, you can also spend a heat. So you have like a stack of, you have a draw pile, a heat pile, and a discard pile. So I can take a heat from my heat pile and put it in my discard pile to boost, and I'll flip cards off the top of my deck until I hit another numbered card to advance more. So you have a little bit of decision making within the resolution of your turn. If you end up next to somebody or one space behind somebody, you get to slipstream and get some extra movement. So everybody has like the same deck, right? We're all using the same cards. So a lot of the differentiation that happens in this game is by hitting slipstreams effectively, right? Because you get like 2 extra movement over the course of the game that can be pretty big. And also comes really predicting, like, where, should I try and move a lot or a little bit here and a lot next time, based on like where I think other people might be with their cars.
Yep.
Then, once you go through your deck, like, you'll shuffle it in, and all of a sudden you'll start drawing like heat cards, which are bad because they don't do anything and you can't discard them. So the only way to get heat out of your hand is you have to like shift down. And if you're in gear 2, you only get to play 2 cards, but you can remove a heat from your hand. And if you're in gear 1, you only play 1 card, but you can remove 3 heat. There's also corners on the race, so you can't go too fast through corners. So every, like, all the tight corners on the map, and there's like several different maps you can play on, have a number on that corner. So say it's 7. So if I pass this corner and my combined movement of all the cards and boosts that I've used are above 7, I have to move 1 heat into my discard pile for the difference. So if I go through at a 9, then 2 heat has to go to my discard pile. If you can't do that, maybe you boosted and you hit a 4 when you were hoping to only hit a 2, then you spin out, you put all your heat remaining into your discard pile, and you have to go back behind the corner into gear 1. So there's a little bit of push your luck there, though you really want to try and avoid that from happening, in my estimation, having played it a couple times. But I mean, that's pretty much it. It's a really simple system. The first time I played it, we did just 1 lap, which is recommended. It took about 40 minutes with 6 people all learning it the first time, so very quick. And I was quite confounded about like what kind of like strategy I should be going for, when I should be moving what. And I kind of got in a bad position in the race where I was like a full corner behind people, right? So once you get out of the corner, you're like shifting up and like moving really far. And I was just like behind them. So I was like too far behind to like start slipstreaming. So I basically didn't use enough heat early enough, because in that 1 lap race, you want to just like use all your heat, right? Because it's not going to matter so much if it's stuck in your hand, or you want to just use heat to get through corners. You don't have to worry about it, that type of thing. But the second time we played it, it was a 2-lap race, and having learned a little bit more about it and being able to start making like intentional choices with my car, I found the system, to be really fun to kind of play in, like start making predictions about where people are going to be. And I also found that one player got way behind early because they were managing their heat more cautiously. I was like, I learned from my mistake, like get through this corner, burn the 3 heat, whatever. I'll like deal with that later. And it seemed like they were just like completely toast. But like playing that strategy, by the second lap, maybe like 2/3 through the game, they had not only caught up, but were like in first place again.
Wow.
Like if anything, they caught up too early. And I have a picture. I'll post it on the Instagram. That is like we're in the second lap of this, like coming up to like the final turn, and all 5 cars in the game are one space apart, like right next to each other in a line, which was like awesome. Like we're just like, wow, we can't believe that, like, this is this tight. Like it felt absolutely insane. And yeah, I mean, it's like it was a total blast. I feel like racing games isn't something that I've found that I really loved so much. Like Long Shot, the dice game, it's barely a racing, it's like a gambling game. Didn't really work for me.
Downforce.
Downforce, oof, that one didn't
Yep.
work for us. But this one, super fun. I don't know that, I don't know if I'll pick it up or not. I might. I'm interested to. I think it's one that plays, another game that plays like kind of loud on the table, right? It's exciting. It looks great. The art is really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, it's one of those games where it's just like, yeah, games are meant to be like super fun. And this one is, just on its face, a really good time that I think would work well with, gaming enthusiast groups, but also the more like lay person population. People are like, yeah, like let's come over and play a game. I want to come over to a game night sometime, but aren't necessarily like, playing games every night or all the time on Board Game Arena. Like this is just the perfect game to play at a game night like that. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think, wow, what a well done game this is. Maybe I should pick it up.
I think that's really cool, Jake. And I love to hear about the sort of impactful decisions around like actually pushing your heat and knowing when to like make a big push. I think that sounds so cool. And it's so thematically evocative of things like the Fast and the Furious, which is when I think of racing, I kind of go back to that classic series. I haven't watched a lot of those movies, but I watched the original one, and that was like a core decision of this like pivotal scene in that movie. So hearing you talk about this game of like, well, yeah, this is the minute that I knew I needed to push the heat, or this person used their heat well and caught up. That sounds like there's rewarding decisions to be had there too. And it's really neat that the game comes with 2 double-sided boards. So you have 4 maps in that base box to like really test your mettle.
Yeah. And there are cool moments too. Like, I was at one point in first place, and I went down to gear 1 to dump 3 heat in my hand. So I only went forward like 2 spaces.
Yep.
And other players probably assume, that I would go more. So then, they go a little bit ahead of me, but don't get the slipstream. And then next time I speed back up and slipstream off them to get back in front,
so
like
sick.
stuff like that. Right. Which is just like so emergent out of these like quite simple mechanisms.
Yeah.
And I can't compare it to Flamme Rouge because I haven't played that. But I think Pete had played both. He played this game as well. And he felt as though, my impression was that he felt like this was a big
strict upgrade.
improvement of the mechanisms in that game. Sort of like take in those mechanisms and then, kind of take it to the next level, make it more of like a gamified version of it.
I've heard that as well. That just, if you liked Flamme Rouge, it's a huge hit. And if you haven't played Flamme Rouge, maybe just swing straight for Heat. So that's one I would love to play. And Jake, thank you so much for talking us through. I talked about 3 games. I feel like you got to just pound through this series of games. And
I'm tired.
It's so fun.
I'm like literally, I'm physically tired because I got back from the Gamers Ranch like 6 hours ago or something. There's like, so all this is very fresh. And yeah, again, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. It's fun to talk about. I hope you enjoyed hearing quick recaps of some of my recent plays experience. If you were at the Gamers Ranch, Thanks again for all the fun games, for teaching games, and look forward to gaming again with you all.
And for all of our pre-planners, as a reminder, get those plays of Spots and Can't Stop in if you'd like to play along with us for our upcoming Push Your Luck podcast episode. Both those games are available on Board Game Arena. Follow us on Instagram. Just search Decision Space Podcast. We'll come right up. And you can find more things Decision Space at decisionspacepodcast.com. Until next time, thank you so much to Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out. And thanks so much, Jake, for regaling us. And until next time, bye, y'all.
Bye.